everyone, and welcome back to Kidlit Chronicles. This is Chelsea, the old, same old, and I'm here with same old other hosts.
That's right. Hannah.
And Nikki.
Yeah.
But today we have not one, but two special guests with us, India Swift and Michael Doig. Yay!
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. And who are you guys?
I guess we're probably known now as the creators behind the Girl in the Glim graphic novel. But before we made that, we kind of built a career for ourselves as animators and artists. So I'm India Swift. I'm an animator, a storyboard artist, and now a graphic novelist. And
Hey, my name is Michael Doig. I like to use the job title color wizard, but it's kind of like a catch-all. I've worked in animation as a color designer. I'm currently art directing on a thing I can't talk about, and I color comics like the graphic novel Girl in the Glim, among others. Yeah, I love everything color and storytelling through color. That's me.
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking to you guys today is because of the Girl in the Glim, this mystical volume of a graphic novel. And Hannah is the one who introduced this to us. So, Hannah, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you found this book and why you like it?
Yes. Well, as an animation major myself, I found DoigSwift through actually Game Grumps because
that happens a lot.
Yeah. But yes, I quickly got super into all your animated like music videos and just other animated things on your YouTube channel. And started watching you stream. And so then I heard about The Girl in the Glim before it came out. And I thought it would be really cool if we could read it and talk about it, because we now have a history of interviewing one person who has written
a history.
A graphic novel.
Yes.
Yes.
You gotta start with one.
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere. And now we have two.
India, our internet trap is working. People are finding us.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Hannah has been amazing with these things. She's always finding people. Meanwhile, Hannah has tweeted at my favorite author multiple times, and I also DM'd them, and they have yet to respond. But one day, maybe it will happen.
Yeah, I hope soon. I'm manifesting it for you guys.
Thank you.
Sending it good vibes.
All right. And what is The Girl in the Glim about, Hannah?
Me. I just took this from your website. So it's about this girl named Bridget who is finding it hard to fit into her new life in the sleepy town of Fort Harbor, and what happens when a supernatural presence takes notice. And that supernatural presence? Aliens.
Aliens.
The Glims and the Glums. The girls are distinctly of Earth.
Yes.
Yes.
And they have, strange alien powers that are somehow related to electronics and technology, which is very cool. I feel like I don't know, I haven't seen that super often, because I feel like, when things go into fantasy, it's less rooted in, like, technological stuff.
I know, I feel like nowadays it's kind of hard to get away from that kind of stuff. It feels almost like it's weird not to include it in a way, you know? Yeah. Especially if you want to kind of connect with people, no pun included, who are reading stuff today.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it felt like such a natural extension of what we were talking about with the book, because the book is so much about connecting with others, and to perpetuate that theme through the technology as well and through the powers of the creatures, it just made a lot of sense. It's also just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the powers of these monsters.
Ooh.
So we can't wait to explore them more and show you guys what else they can do.
Wow. Okay, that's very enticing.
Ooh, I hope so. The mystery.
Yeah. I really like the way that technology is incorporated. I'm an English major, so I guess I read a lot of old books, or was an English major before I graduated a couple months ago. And I feel like it's pretty rare to, at least for me, to read things that are like so just like positive about like the role of technology in our lives. I like the scene that really stuck out to me was like the whole thing with Marla, right? Like, she's like one of the side characters in the first book. Her phone isn't working because of the something with like the Glim's powers. And I don't know, on the outside you kind of just like assume that, oh, she's just like this teenage girl who's obsessed with her phone, and like, you know, that's like her whole character. But then it's like revealed, right, that the reason why she is really obsessed with her phone is because she's waiting for a very important phone call about the outcome of her father's surgery. And yeah, I just thought that was like a really like empathetic, like positive message about technology, right? That like it's really the way that we connect with people, and that we should like, and it's like a good thing. Like, it's the good alien is the one that helps us connect through technology. So I was wondering, like, if that kind of message was something that you were thinking about, like, from the outside. Like, I want this story to be about technology.
Yeah, it was definitely an aspect of it that we wanted to explore a bit, because it felt like it fit so naturally into everything else which was happening in the story, emotionally for the characters, and physically with the world as well, and the powers of the aliens. But yeah, I've also noticed that a lot of the stuff that we see nowadays, it kind of demonizes technology a lot. You know, people being on their phones is seen as a bad thing. And while I agree that when it goes to an extreme, it can be a bad thing, connecting to others is really important, you know, for mental health, as well as just, you know, everyday convenience. And I wanted to really like strip away the top layer of just looking at something and assuming it's going to be bad immediately. And one of the things we really wanted to dig into in the book was pushing past outside appearances and digging a bit deeper and finding out what's really going on underneath. And that's a theme that runs through the book as well. So being able to, I'm really glad that you picked up on the fact that when we first get introduced to this character, Marla, she's kind of shown as being a little bit antisocial, a little bit stuck on her phone, but there really is a good reason for it. And she has her own things going on. And Bridget, the main character, learning that other people have stuff going on with them that she might not know about. And that's sometimes why people act the way they do. And getting to know people and getting to understand their stories is the key to kind of figuring out what's going on with them. That's a huge point of growth for her throughout the books. So yeah, technology was a great tool for that.
It's a very tactile thing as well, that you can show like breakdowns in communication is like, this thing is literally broken in front of you. And it was a good way of kind of visualizing that metaphor in the book.
Mm-hmm. In the future, readers are going to discover that it's not just technology that the aliens can affect. And it's going to be really fun to do that reveal and get to explore a bit further what other things can be connected and disconnected.
It's interesting. We have all kinds of questions about predictions and stuff.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear them.
But yeah, that's really cool, like the connection disconnection thing. Yeah, that's like such a broad metaphor that you could use for so many things. Okay, interesting. I'll think about, see if I have anything by the end.
Yeah.
Okay, also relating to that, yeah, I relate to a lot about what you were saying about how like it kind of, technology like gets like a bad rap, like people being like online all the time, but it's really like the way that it's like your online network can be a real source of like social fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because all of my best friends and my childhood friends, like we all went to colleges in different parts of the country, and this is like the way that we talk to each other and like stay friends is completely online, which was something that I didn't even think, I don't know, I used to, when I was younger, think that was not like as real as like in life friendships, but that's like my whole life now. So
yeah, I mean, when we were young, our parents would always keep in contact with one another through writing letters, and it's really no different. It's just much more instant. And it's honestly great to be able to see people from different fan groups or people who maybe have different things going on with them, be able to find others going through similar things or who enjoy the same things, and then making friendships through that kind of shared experience. And we wouldn't have that if we didn't get to, you know, be on our phones and find like-minded people. So while sometimes it can be a bit of a scary place, like especially as animators as well, I'm sure you guys all live most of your lives online as well, especially right now during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. You know, it's really a godsend to be able to keep in contact with everyone. from friends and family to new people that you get to meet.
A lot of the opportunities that we've had career-wise wouldn't exist without those peer groups that, like, we've made friends through similar interests, and like the things that we've been able to do have only been made possible by interacting in that way online.
Yeah, you guys wouldn't have found us without the Game Grumps. So, you know.
That's true. So yeah, you guys are primarily animators, or you work in animation. So like, did you find like any through line between like the process of working on something animated versus working on a graphic novel?
Yeah, definitely. They're actually like really surprisingly similar. And yeah, at the same time, very separate. Like the stuff you can learn from and bring from one to the other, and there's also stuff which is completely new that you're like on your own learning. So for example, learning to use page layouts, that was really fun, and it's something that's so unique to comic books, you know, the turn of a page being so important, and the kind of surprises you can hide behind the page turn, and how different panel sizes and different complexities of panels will change the speed of the reading and therefore change the pace. You know, that kind of stuff is something I had to kind of learn as I went along. But one thing that definitely helped me in terms of animation, to not say the obvious thing, which is just like drawing a lot, definitely helped. I think the fact that animation is such a kind of labor heavy thing to do really helped prepare me for how much of a big undertaking the book was going to be. You know, having to draw hundreds of drawings to get 1 second of footage, or well, a couple of seconds of footage, really helped prepare me for the fact that drawing hundreds of pages was going to be, you know, quite intensive. But I felt kind of mentally prepared for that before I went into it. How about you?
I think as well that like Glim as a book is kind of sometimes compared to watching an animated show, and I think a big part of that is your approach to like what moments you choose to show and how you kind of, it's almost like you don't just get like the keys between the moments. Sometimes you put in those in between so that people can feel the motion. And I think that's a really like that's because you're coming from an animated background and you're used to having those moments included. But I think it adds a really nice sense of motion and a sense like it's a nice quirk to the way you storytell, and I feel like that's because of your background.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I overpan a lot because of that.
I think you panel just fine.
I definitely approached it in a different way, though, to most comic book creators. I think going into it, a lot of the people that I've spoken to who come up through comics alone, they tend to write a script first, and they'll write all the words out and all the speech and all the dialogue and everything that's going to happen. And then from there, they'll move into thumbnails and pencils. Whereas for me, because I'm a visual person, it felt much more natural to just go straight into thumbnails and figure out how I want to tell the story, and then go back through the thumbnails and be like, where does it feel like it needs dialogue? Where is it natural to put dialogue in? Where do I need a bit of extra explanation in there? And where does it feel like someone should be saying something? And because of that, I think the book probably has less dialogue in it than most, because I really wanted to push the show, don't tell aspect of it.
I think it works though as well, because with the character, they're not really able to talk to that many people. So you kind of feel their isolation because they're not saying a lot, and they're not being talked to a lot until they are. And it does feel like she's trying to connect with people, and it's harder. There's a lot, like there's more space for our own like seeing her emotion than her necessarily being like, I'm sad or some things like that. If I can answer from my point of view, as working in animation, as I said, I really love color in narrative and how you can use color to augment and emphasize like how a character is maybe feeling, or what an event is supposed to kind of feel like. And I tried to put that into the book. So as well as having like color themes and that sort of thing, maybe like green for fear or things that Bridget might be afraid of, There's also instances where I like to go like more abstract with the color, so it feels a little bit more unnatural, and that kind of plays into the supernatural elements of it as well. And in addition to that, I really love what's called color holds, which is where you color the inks. And that you see that in old Disney films or from the 90s and stuff, they would color the inks. And I tried to emulate that to kind of give it an animated feel, because I wanted to support India's ambition that it was an animated show. It just happens to be printed on paper.
So by color, the inks, what exactly does that mean?
Well, it's all inked digitally. So really, in practical terms, it means adding in Photoshop a layer above the inks and then locking how you paint to what's below. And you just paint an extra layer on top that sits inside where the inks are. And you just, I'll maybe take a darker tone to the skin. And if there's a jawline or something around the line of the face, rather than it being pure black like that starts out, you'll get a sort of like warmer, like auburn or something like that. So it feels like it's the edge of the face rather than necessarily just a black line. And I'll go through and try and do that as much as possible, mostly on close-ups of characters. If they're a little bit farther away, then they'll maybe get a whole color to themselves, or if they're a background character, they're not necessarily black. I like doing that as well to show distance. But yeah, I think it's a really nice way of softening the look and feel of the book.
And that's something that you kind of learn to do through looking at old cartoons.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you ever look at like ink and paint on like
Sleeping
Disney
Beauty or something,
yeah, you'll see that they've colored the line.
Oh, okay. I'm learning right now.
Shanna's furiously taking notes on the side.
Yeah, no, it's great. It really softens the line out. It creates a really nice effect. I especially love it when you use it when a character is backlit, and they've got lighting coming in from behind them, and then use like a red rim to show that the light is diffusing through the skin.
Yeah, so instead of adding like a rim light into the silhouette of the character, I tend to just brighten the inks so that it feels like it's catching the edge of them. And I kind of adopted that after the fact, because I tried it the other way first. And one of the things about the characters, I've tried to keep them a little bit clearer, so there's not a lot of texture in them, because if they were animated, then you wouldn't be able to get so much texture unless you're working on something like Klaus, where they were crazy evil. But
wow, Klaus.
I think on the next book I want to explore doing more texture in the backgrounds, but keeping the characters still clear.
Okay, well, while we're on this subject, just to go a little bit deeper, we were also kind of wondering about how you work together as like artist and illustrator and colorist to work together cohesively to create kind of this vision of what the Girl in the Glim is. And if you also want to talk about what it was like to work together as partners on this project.
So Mike and I have kind of always had a bit of a creative relationship with one another. We actually met because I tried to hire Mike to work on a game project with me.
Whoa.
I was like, this dude's an awesome concept artist. Let's get him on the team. So
Yeah,
we met like that. And then the project kind of dissolved, sadly. And the friendship continued. And when we got together, we were like, oh, we have to make something together. Like, I love drawing, you love drawing. Let's make something cool.
Yeah, I remember. I think I visited your apartment for the first time, and on the wall was a Post-it note or something, and I think it read something like find someone to collaborate creatively with, and I was like, ho ho.
Check.
But yeah, about 6 months in, I was expressing to you that I wanted to get into comics, but I was very unsure about paneling, language, and speech bubbles. And so you were like, well, why don't you just make a comic that has neither of those? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about?
If you can dream it, you can make it.
And I think for Christmas that year, we came up with a story of an Advent comic. And so it was this one that it's called Frostblight Saga. And basically every day we put out a new page of the comic, and it was this panelist at like speech bubble-less comic that like it was almost like a flowing vertical canvas. And the way that we worked on that was, if one of us had a strong idea, we would start painting, and then once we kind of like felt that painting fatigue, or we had to move to something like a bit of freelance, we would just pass it to the next person. Well, not next person, the other person. There's two of us. And they would continue painting and roughing it up and then pass it back. And it formed a lot of trust between us, because it was like, what strengths can I add to this? What ideas do I have here? And it was a really like, it was awesome. And we just did that every day and released them. And it was kind of funny that at the start of the story, people were like, oh, we love this character. And we were like, oh no, we basically came up with like 24 bullet points of like the story, and that character was not coming back.
No, that character was gonna sadly pass.
So there was interesting part of that was like telling the story live and getting feedback live. People were like, oh, I really like this character. And we're like, oh
no.
They ended up changing the ending just a little bit.
Yeah, because of that. We wanted people to have a happy Christmas, you know.
Yeah, we didn't want following it for the whole month and then like, sorry, it's gone. That's stakes, yo.
But we kind of continued that relationship into Girl in the Glim. So we don't necessarily pass the pages back and forth anymore, but we kind of grew out of that basis. So generally, I will basically ink it and then pass it to Doig. And Doig will colour it and pass it back to me. I'll give him notes and pass it back to Doig. Doig will do the notes, pass it back to me, and I'll be like, awesome.
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll even change things myself, because there are cases where I'll look at a page that Doig has coloured and I'll be like, oh man, those inks don't look like I wanted them to. Like, this isn't reading the way I wanted it to. And the only way to change it is to change the inks, which means that Doig is going to have to recolour it. So on those occasions, I'm like, I'm not going to give him extra work. I'll just tweak this myself.
I didn't know that. No, I'm kidding. I knew that. But yeah, I think also part of working on it is like in the early stages, we would just talk back and forth about the underlying story to it. And like, while India is like super the main creator on it, like I'm just there as a kind of sounding board. It's nice to have that open line of communication. It's not like
I couldn't have written the story without Doig. Like, having someone next to me to bounce ideas from and be like, how does this sound? Does this make sense? Like, was really instrumental in pulling the story together back when I was first trying to write it all out. And a lot of Doig's ideas are in there. So,
I have ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not always completely smooth. Like, I think a big part of it is learning how to communicate. I can often get a little bit inside my own head sometimes, and it can be difficult to like get me to concede on a point at times. But I think just being able to communicate, like I'm not enjoying this change or this it's just talking out, I think really helps.
Yeah.
Like if you have creative differences, then being able to communicate what those differences are and try and find a middle point is really good.
Yeah. And I can be a bit of a control freak, but I think I'm getting better.
Yeah. There was we kind of worked on this book in two parts, one back in 2017 and then again later when IDW were interested in continuing it with us. And I think at the end of the first edition of the first self-published book, there was a like end of the time process where me and India basically sat next to one another. It
was like that crunch period where it was like, we have 2 days to finish this to get it sent off in time for it to be printed. And we have to fix everything. Yeah. So we're just going to crunch on this.
So we basically just sat side by side for those like 2 whole days and just like, okay, where's everything? And a lot of it was just like, I had missed things. Like I remember the classroom scene, if you remember when Bridget first goes in there and all the kids are looking at her and all the chair legs are all chair legs.
Those chair legs.
And he was like, that's a chair leg. That's not a chair leg. That's carpet. That's someone's leg. That's a chair leg. So we would just sit and just clarify things and that
was really stressful though. Let's never do that again.
No, we avoided that before. Then,
so yeah. I think that was one of the times when I was a bit too much of a control freak. And I think I've eased off a bit since then. So we're always kind of learning and trying to work with one another better. Even though we've been together for a really long time and we've been making stuff together for a really long time, there's still times when we don't see eye to eye on things. And the most important thing is just that we both really respect one another's skill sets. So we can normally come to a compromise, or at least just be like, okay, I can see why you think that's better. Let's leave it like that then.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently learned there's like two kinds of thinking. I think it was a neurodiversity workshop. And there's like people who can close and people who can't. I'm definitely a person that can't close the tasks, whereas India is very much like the thrill of finishing a task is her joy. And I like, no, let me just tinker with this a little bit more. And she's like, no, let's get it done.
Get it finished.
For example, before this, when we actually thought this interview was an hour earlier because we misread GMT. So in that hour, India was like, maybe you could just finish this video. And I was like, oh, but they'll take the render time of the, how long will the render take? I'm like, 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes. I was like, all right. She's like, let's get it done. She's very much, I think, in terms of like collaborating, she's very much this thing that I needed to get my butt in gear. So finishing things is like my fear, and finishing things for her is like,
yes.
Yeah. So together we become productive.
Listen, I'm addicted to that amazing feeling where you're on a spreadsheet and you get to turn the box green and be like, yes, it's done. It's off my plate. Get out of here, task.
Whereas I'm hovering over the close button on the spreadsheet and never want to look at it again.
Yeah, you never open the spreadsheet. You make it and then you never look at it again.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so I relate to India because I have like a paper planner because I love the feeling of like physically scribbling out the task when I'm done with it.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
so good.
You're like India in that way, because I feel like I would never get anything done on the podcast if you didn't have deadlines. You're a project maker.
Yeah, totally. You need that collaborative kind of like strengths. I think that's what makes group projects feel worthwhile, is that you could do something, but when you do it together, you create something that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Yeah, stronger together. Like, without Doig here, I would be so obsessed with finishing things that I would push things out with a lot of mistakes in them. Because I'm notoriously like tunnel visioned when I want to get something done, and sometimes I miss obvious things. But Doig's like, just finish this thing tomorrow so you can sleep on it. And the next day I'm always like, oh, I would have missed this really important thing. So it's like the best of both is kind of where you want to be.
You guys are gonna make me cry. Wow.
We do that.
We make each other cry. Oh, no.
I'm fine.
For our podcast listeners, I feel obligated to say this. But in our video feed, they're using like a stream overlay of some animated characters, which are super cute. And now I'm like, as it goes on, I'm like more and more convinced that I need to figure out how to do this for myself because I want one.
This is something that Doig has built for our morning streams that we do on Twitch. He's got a little bear that can make happy and sad expressions, and he was crying as his bear. Now he's looking mad as his bear.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had some characters that we were very curious about how they were made, because we just thought that they were so interesting. For me, like, I thought that Joe's character was just so interesting, like the way that he looks, like the poofy red hair on like both sides of his head. They kind of look like horns to me because I thought that he was evil, I guess. And also, like, I don't know, his frame kind of felt like very like weaselly or like snaky to me. So yeah, I was just wondering, like, what was the process of like making his character?
Those are some great observations. Yeah, you got it. Actually, the origin of Girl in the Glim is that I took a character design course, and on the character design course, one of the big things we learned was the importance of hooking your character into the story. So we had to come up with a premise along with the characters. And that's where Girl in the Glim was originally like born, something like 5 or 6 years ago. So I was designing the characters as part of that course. So there's a lot of visual language that went into them that I was learning about on the course, about taking the intrinsic qualities and making them extrinsic in the design, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, there's a lot to Jove's design. It actually changed a lot. When it first started out, he was much more kind of he was more rotund, and he had more of a kind of mean clown look going on. And when I showed that to my course instructor, he was like, that's cool. It's just a little bit expected. You know, I feel like I've seen this character before. You know, it's the big mean bully who has like, you know, dark hair and he looks mean and he stomps around. Tried to come up with something a bit more specific to the character and a bit more nuanced. So I went back to the drawing board with it and tried to really think about who Jove was. And I went through a lot of different kind of symbology, and I looked at a lot of kind of mundane objects, and I looked at a lot of animals, and I tried to figure out kind of what would match with Jove's personality. And I think what came out the other end was a lot more interesting, a lot more fun of a design. And he's honestly one of my most favorite characters to draw now in the book. So yeah, he's got such a laid back personality. That's one of the things about Jove that will come out more in later books, is like he's very louche. So I wanted to kind of show this through having this kind of sloopy silhouette that almost can like mold around to anything. It's almost like ferret-like. And it's very like bottom heavy to show this kind of laziness and lack of care that he has. I based this color scheme around stop signs, warning signs. So there's a lot of oranges, a lot of reds. He's almost like a traffic cone in terms of the way his color scheme works and his shape language works. And his head's like one of those hexagonal stop signs. And then the hair was meant to look like horns. And originally it was straight. And then Doig was like, what if you tried making it curly? And I was like, that's a stupid idea. That won't work. And then I drew it. And I was like, I love this. This is perfect. Because it brought that clownness back into kind of his design. And it added this like fun dynamic with kind of sharp angles that he has on the rest of his design. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. Making him kind of larger than the other characters where he feels imposing, but getting that kind of laid back look into him where he's almost got this continually casual appearance, but then getting the kind of spikes of meanness in there too. And rolling all that together with kind of stop signs and stuff was really fun.
Wow, that's so cool. I didn't think about the traffic cone thing, but that makes a lot of sense.
He's like genuinely kind of scary looking, in my opinion.
He's a scary guy, at least to Bridget.
Yeah, so I was burning with curiosity about a different character, which was Sylvia, because she was really interesting to me, and the reason is because I could relate to her a lot in her perfectionisticness and her like fixation on grades. Like that was totally me in school. But then at the same time, she's a little bit also of a, maybe not a bully, but she's a bit rude. She comes off as rude because she fixates so much on the grade, like in chemistry class, that she ends up being mean to Bridget. And she wants Bridget to get detention and stuff like that. So I can see her kind of at the end musing over the photograph she finds and wondering what Bridget is up to. I can kind of see that as almost like the villain, like musing about their evil plan. So to me, she seems like she might be have a bit of a villainous side, especially maybe in the sequel. But yeah, I was just wondering where that character came from. And she kind of almost reminds me of a snake now that I'm thinking about like animals and stuff, because I associate her with green. I guess she was wearing green. I'm not sure, but yeah,
that's another great thing to pick up. Actually, yeah, the characters all have kind of character colors, and Sylvia's is green.
Okay, awesome.
And Jove's is orange. And yeah, there was a. Sorry, Mike, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, which is interesting because if I remember rightly, her speech bubbles are yellow, like her post-it notes, but the color that we think of for her is green. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like she's got maybe a hair tie and maybe
And a turtleneck. That's green. Yeah. But yeah, Sylvia's a really fun character. I love drawing and writing Sylvia because I get to draw really intense expressions on her all the time.
Oh yeah.
But she's a fun character to me because I very much identify with her too. She's kind of inspired by a streak that I have inside myself of perfectionism. And Sylvia's an interesting character in that, like Bridget, she's kind of a loner, but for Sylvia, it's because she chooses to be that way. Because Sylvia doesn't really have time for other people. She doesn't have time for niceties. She feels like other people are potentially going to drag her down. It's, the dreaded group project mentality, but in everyday life, where it's like, I know that if I get put in a group, no one else is going to do anything and I'll have to carry everything. So I'm just going to do all this by myself and get good grades. And I don't have time for everyone else because I need to focus on this thing. And that's like an unhealthy way to live. But it's something that she'll have to confront later in the story, which again is something I'm very looking forward to digging into with her. But she makes a very fun contrast to Bridget's character because she's so proactive and she's so in your face that she kind of counteracts Bridget's shyness. So I think there's going to be a lot of very fun interactions between both of them because she'll kind of help to pull Bridget out of her shell a little bit. In terms of her character design, she's based a lot around time turners and light bulbs. So you can kind of see in her bun, she's got this kind of light bulb shape, almost like she's got an idea all the time. And her entire like head and then lower torso is kind of like an hourglass, which is running out of time. She's got this stripe across her middle. She always feels like she's racing against the clock to get stuff done. But an interesting contrast that I wanted to bring across with a character, because it's something that happens to me a lot, is even though she's a perfectionist and she cares a lot about being productive, she's a bit frazzled. She's not necessarily the most organized. So she's always kind of disheveled and she's always covered in these post-it notes that trail with her everywhere that she uses to remember things, because if she doesn't write everything down, she's going to forget it. So getting all that into a character design was a lot of fun. And again, trying to make it that really specific mix of perfectionism and the emphasis on her academia and caring about being successful, and contrasting that with an element of clumsiness, of mess, of disorganization was a lot of fun when it came to designing her character.
I like her rucksack as well because it's so oversized.
It's so overloaded,
filled with everything. It's like she's trying to carry her ambition all the time.
Yeah,
everywhere.
She's trying to take on way too much.
Yeah.
I love the sticky notes so much. I love that they were just all up on her outfit.
Yeah.
When we saw her room at the end, I was like, that's me. That's my room.
I was looking forward to showing that. Just post-its everywhere and just mess all over the place. Yeah. It's like so often when you see very smart characters in animation or in comics, the smart together perfectionist character is shown as being very neat and orderly and having everything together. So I really wanted to show the side of that where it's like, not everyone is like that. A lot of people really care about doing a good job, but are not necessarily the best at organizing themselves or not taking on too much.
It's interesting too, because when you're doing the character design for them, one of the exercises that you gave yourself and that you enjoyed was what would the characters' bedrooms look like? And it gave you an insight into who they were. And you were able to kind of see both. Well, you haven't quite seen Bridget's totally yet because she's still yet to unpack, but you definitely saw a glimpse of Sylvia's.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it was cool that you got to put that in there because you had those sketches from way early on that you were like, okay, this is where Sylvia lives. This is her day-to-day.
This is her nest.
This is her nest, yeah.
So before we get to the end, talking about, predictions and the next book and stuff like that, Hannah had a small question about something that I don't understand. But okay. Go ahead.
Okay, this is kind of silly, but I noticed like a similarity in some ways between The Girl in the Glim and this anime I like called Natsume Eugene Show. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or watched it.
I haven't. What is it?
It's like, so the way I found it similar was that like it's kind of about this kind of social outcasty character who can see like supernatural creatures that other people cannot see. And he also kind of has to like save people from them without them knowing like that it's even happening because they can't see it. So, you know, I noticed that similarity.
I might be biased, but that sounds cool.
Yeah.
I could watch that.
Yeah, and that's one reason.
Is real.
That's one reason I liked your book so much, is because I was like, this reminds me of my favorite anime, not some Eugene show or whatever.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, we're not familiar, but
Yeah,
we'd like
you
to
should
be.
send us a little email with that afterwards, and we'll check it out because we love anime. Always looking for new ones to watch.
You probably like it. It's very sweet. It's like slice of life. But I can segue into our prediction section with this.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, there's something that happens within Natsume Eugene Cho. Just, like, one reason it's fun to watch is because Natsume is, like, alone at the beginning and he doesn't have, like, any friends. But as the show goes on, he kind of collects, like, allies and friends to, like, help him with, like, defeating the evil, like, spirits or whatever. So I was kind of hoping... They're wiggling their eyebrows. I was kind of hoping that we would get to see Midge, like, have allies because she's so lonely right now. So yeah, that's kind of my prediction.
That's a good prediction. I'm not gonna say anything about it.
Can't say too much about it.
It'd be great if that happened. The ambition is eventually for there to be a kind of Scooby gang that can go around and fight monsters. But that's all I'll say.
I would love to see a Scooby gang.
Relating to that, something that I was thinking about. Okay, well, it's interesting that Nikki said that, like, she felt that Sylvia was going to be villainous. Because I definitely see her as, like, you know, being, like, some sort of obstacle to Bridget. But I feel like the eventual thing is that they will, like, become friends, right? I'm wondering also what is going to happen with Jove. Because I think right now we don't really know what his, like, motivation is for... I guess, like, picking on Bridget so hard, other than, you know, just to, like, get other people's attention. So I'm I'm invested in Jove. But something else that I was thinking about was that, you know, we talked a lot about, like, being connected and disconnected through technology. In the beginning, Bridget, you know, she's, like, missing her friends from wherever she moved from. But she hasn't seen, like, talking to them, you know, through the phone or online about what's going on in her life. So I'm curious about, like, if they're going to show up at some point in the next book.
That's another good prediction as well. Yeah. I think one of the things which I'm going to enjoy digging into in the next book is maybe how Bridget is a little bit self-sabotaging because she's so nervous and worried about being a burden to people that maybe she has been reaching out to her old friends like she should have been. You know, at this point, she hasn't tried to get in contact with them after moving. And I think there's a certain relatable point there where it's like, you don't necessarily want to make everything about you, and you don't want to call people and tell them you're having a bad time because you don't want to bring kind of to bring the attention onto yourself in a negative way. And that's like an act of self-sabotage in itself, is that you need to be able to feel like you can rely on the people who you care about in your life. So I think that's going to be a little bit of a point in the next book.
I find that whenever you're in a tough situation, it's always made tougher by your mindset against it. And even if, like, you're not like directly tackling what's troubling you, if you have a way to alleviate that mindset, it's almost, you can see the trouble in a fresh light, and we almost close ourselves off to that because we don't think that we should, like, as if you don't want to burden someone, or you don't want to be like that, like a detriment to their lives, then you can kind of crawl inside a little bit your own head.
Yeah.
And I learned recently that some of the team members I was working with, they were like, I would have been better if we had more check-ins together. And I was like, oh, you guys know that you could reach out to me anytime, right? And they're like, yeah, we knew that, but I learned that you kind of have to create that climate to allow for people to talk to you by being proactive about it. So even if you're only like contactable when things are going wrong, then people are less likely to come to you as often as when you can contact when things are going right. So it's like opening up that channel for just the conversation so that good and bad things can flow there, rather than it just being like, hey, let me know when you need help. Like, just let me know how you are is a lot more to kind of, you'll probably hear a lot more about them needing help when they feel like they can come to you for the good things as well. So
and also the fact that, you know, Bridget not contacting her friends because she doesn't want to be a burden, but then being sad that her friends aren't contacting her, being able to kind of pull her out of her own head a little bit and be like, well, maybe they wanted to hear from you, but they haven't yet. And you're all kind of in the same boat, waiting for someone to make the first move, you know? And so often just making that first move is the most difficult thing in like making friends and keeping friendships, but it's worth doing it even if it feels awkward.
For sure. Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
That's so relatable. Yeah. People hate reaching out. And people hate, like, hate is a strong word, but I think people are very bad at, like, making plans and sticking to them and responding to messages.
I definitely am.
Yeah, the smallest thing can reduce momentum on communication that you wouldn't really realize until after the fact, but it's only when you kind of look back, it's like, oh, I could have done this then, and then I think it's important to kind of take that on board going forward, that people just like to hear from other people just cause, like, I was thinking of you, so hello, rather than necessarily like, hey, I need this thing. You're like, what am I to you, a dispensary of favors? You're like, no, just like, let's hang out, chill out together.
Yeah. I forgot what the question was.
We went on the journey.
Got too off.
It's because I used it for my own nefarious purposes. I was like, oh, I have things to talk about, and I've got an opportunity here.
No, that was therapeutic. Yeah, that was like
That's a good point.
It's a moment.
It's a message that I guess you don't see very much in media, but I think a lot of people go through that, right? So I think we can all relate to the situation of like communicating with others and having trouble with that. But yeah. And apparently that will be a message in The Girl in the Glim going forward.
Sure will. As one person who finds it difficult to communicate, I will put the book out there and hope it connects with other people who feel the same.
Hannah and Nikki, did you have any other questions/predictions for the next volume that you wanted to bring up?
Not really. Well, mine was just we've already talked about mine. I'm invested in Sylvia, and I agree. I think she'll be a bit annoying maybe still at the beginning of the next book, but then she'll eventually become friends with Bridget. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sylvia hits Bridget with a car.
Spoilers. How old is this child? Can she drive?
That's why she hit her. She's learning.
But my prediction kind of has to do with that. Like
what?
Darker turn, perhaps. I was watching your Q&A launch party, and I saw that you said that you were inspired by like Buffy and Stranger Things to like for the direction of the story. So, you know, both of those shows are pretty dark. So I was wondering if like you had an idea of going a bit darker in like later books.
I think one of the things is that Girl in the Glim is like really heavily inspired by the stuff I watched when I was a kid. And that was like Jurassic Park, Gremlins, Aliens. And it's like, I think back to it now and I'm like, yeah, they were such kid-friendly scares. And then I'm like, oh, wait, didn't someone get their head bitten off by a T-Rex? And didn't someone like get a chest burster come out of them in Aliens? So
I wouldn't call Alien a kid's film as such,
No.
but I wouldn't also call Glim a kid's book either. I feel
no,
like
not necessarily.
it has a kind of like look and feel of something that's quite charming, but there's a lot of emotional maturity there.
I would like there to be a lot of depth. I think what I'm going for is I want the kind of feeling of adventure that those films and series instilled in me when I was a kid. You know, when I was kind of going through it and I was escaping through films and I was escaping through games and I was having these epic adventures, I want that feeling for Glim. But I don't necessarily think it will be as dark in terms of like visceral, physical gore or anything. But I would like to explore deeper, darker issues in terms of like psyche and emotional stuff. Because I think it's really important that the world itself has an element of danger to it. And it feels like characters could get hurt there, just so that people reading feel like there are actually stakes to failing and there are actually stakes to the world and to the characters. I really wanted it to feel like things could go badly in the book. And I think it makes those moments of victory all that much sweeter and more meaningful when you feel like there was a real element there where things could have not been okay.
Yeah, I think we've seen in comparisons, just as we've kind of put it out recently, to Hilda and things like that. And I feel like,
and I love Hilda. Hilda's amazing.
It's really cool. I think in our original pitch somewhere, it's like this book is kind of Hilda with teeth. And I think it feels like when Hilda addresses to be afraid of things, it almost resolves it like, it's okay. The thing that you were afraid of is nice all along. Whereas I feel like Glim is more like, it's okay to be afraid of this thing because it is actually like scary. Like it, and it's okay to be afraid of it because that's a good response. That'll keep you going. That'll keep you alive. That'll keep you out of danger. And so like it's kind of teaching.
There are things which aren't scary, but there are also things that are scary and do mean harm.
Yeah.
And we wanted that element to be in the book, to have that element of danger in there, rather than feeling like we're going to pull the rug out from under you and be like, but they were just nice all along. Bad things happen, but there are reasons for them and you can understand it. And I think that's one of the big kind of morals of the story we wanted to come out with, which was fear is less scary when you understand it. And it's not necessarily about the fear being misplaced or the things not being scary themselves or a misunderstanding. It's more just that if you can see where the fear comes from, then you can understand why it is the way it is, and that makes it less scary, because a lot of our fear is based upon the unknown and just not understanding what's happening or where things are coming from. I don't know how much sense that makes, but that's that's the feel.
I'm still digesting it. It's delicious though.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no. I think when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of like middle grade horror books. Like the first time that I discovered that there were even like horror novels that were meant for kids, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. So I like the thing about, having actual stakes, like having fear that isn't just completely like redirected into something harmless. Like I think those things are great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Something that our Stephanie Cook said was that like kids really like to read up because you like to feel like you're more mature because you're engaging with these like really intense topics. So even if it isn't directly like a middle grade book or a kid's book or anything, I think that audience will enjoy it with all these mature themes that are in it.
I hope so. I mean, we've wrapped them in an action adventure package, which is the kind of book which I probably would have wanted to read. And still do, because I love action adventure stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of allegory and metaphor there, but it's for real things that kids. I think the reason that kids often read up is because they're needing to learn that stuff next in order to become that older version of themselves. And so if you speak down to the age that you feel that the kid is, it's like that was them yesterday. You gotta let them. You gotta show them how to be who they'll be next. And
and you gotta prepare them
with that. Yeah.
Not confronting things until they come upon them is a great recipe to make life way scarier than it needs to be. So I definitely believe that kids can take a lot more than people maybe give them credit for. And I think teaching kids to be emotionally intelligent and teaching kids to be awesome from an early age is probably like a good thing.
And I think this story is also applicable and relatable to people who have went through those experiences and maybe not resolved them, or like we've all maybe been in that place. And so even if you're not experienced at the time, this book is for This book is for kids who have felt lonely and are still maybe coming to terms with that, or like, I know I had regrets as a kid that I didn't make as many friends, or I wasn't as like outgoing as I could be. And I hold on to some of those regrets, and seeing that maybe, you know, I could have been different, or things could have gone differently if I'd only known certain things. It's like we kind of hold on to those thoughts and feelings and subconsciously, and it kind of affects us later in life. But it's okay to let go of those. Like, I don't know, it feels like childhood is a very turbulent time, and you can't just band-aid it of like, oh, it's okay. Like it is tough, and
It can be, yeah.
I think for a lot of people, and talking about that is important. So it's good to have
at
stories.
Least acknowledging it is definitely important.
Yeah.
Even as adults, well, all three of us are adults, and we just read kids' books like all the time for this, and we still learn things. I think that books that are, like targeted towards kids or whatever, like they should be for everyone.
I agree. Yeah, I think anyone should be able to read anything they want.
Yes.
I mean, I guess it's an exception if you're a very young kid and there's like very adult content in something, but I think in general, like mostly it's a stigma of not, older people not being able to watch cartoons or read kids' books. And it's like, why? They're delightful. They have awesome stories and characters, and I love them.
Death to cringe.
Become the cringe you want to see in the world.
Let's remove the still from the statement. You still watch cartoons. Yes. Because they will continue to be awesome.
But that's the thing is the people who make cartoons and who write kids' books are all adults. And we're all just kind of channeling that inner child.
Wait, what? They're all adults? Adults make animation?
They sure do.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like we all channel how we felt at that age and try and deliver something that we think will help the next generation, or at least be fun to read for the next generation. So limiting that only to people who are young seems silly. I definitely hope that kids enjoy Gil and the Glim, and I hope it really helps them through any hard times they have. But I also hope a bunch of my nerdy animation friends also enjoy Gil and the Glim.
Yeah, which is most of the people who like we come into contact with of like, oh, we picked up your book and we're like, cool. Do you enjoy? We want to make sure that you're enjoying it as well, because it's really good to get that kind of feedback from people, and it's really cool to be on like talking to you guys because of it. Like, yeah, we really appreciate you guys reaching out and just talking to us and letting us talk about art, like where we're coming from and how that's resonated with you. Like, this is so valuable.
Oh yeah, thank you guys for coming on. This was so fun. This was a blast. And it was so cool to learn more about the illustrating and the coloring side of things. Final question is just, so the next volume, what's going on there? When is it happening?
As soon as I can make it happen, it's happening. So I have the entire story mapped out for all of the books I want to do with Gil and the Glim. So we have beginning right through to the very end planned out. We know what's going to go on with all the characters. So we know what's going to go on with book 2. And I'm currently thumbing it. And it will be out as soon as I can make it, hopefully, and IDW can publish it. I'm really excited to continue the story because it only gets more wild from here.
You ain't seen nothing yet. It's
Book
funny.
One's kind of Act 1, and now we get into Act 2 with all the fun and games that entails.
Yeah, I'm very excited because, like, as India said, she worked on this as part of a character workshop, and so it's been like 6 years of like living in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like it's lived a little bit in mine as much as in yours, just from talking to you and like knowing and casting farther ahead. And we're currently working on a animated trailer for the book, as part of like trying to promote it and get it out there, because as animators, like there's nothing quite like dropping some animation.
Feels like something we can do.
And you were big inspired by a book called Kairos, who put out an animated trailer, so we're kind of following in the footsteps of giants here. But as part of the trailer, there is like allusions to future stuff that's in farther books. So it's kind of cool and wild that we get to kind of see snippets of that.
That's the advantage to having it all planned out, is we get to try and tease people with like, oh, what's this in the background? Oh, what's that frame? So I hope people like it when it's out.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
We will definitely be watching and reading the future volumes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you guys so much again for coming and talking to us. Everybody who's listening to this should go and buy and read The Girl in the Glim, because it's so awesome.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Thank you
really,
very
really
much.
happy to hear that you guys enjoyed it. Like, that's huge. It's the best feeling in the world. It's one thing putting a book out there. It's a whole other thing when someone's like, hey, I liked it.
But there was like so there was a bit of a delivery kind of, not mishap, but we were expecting the book to go out on the 7th of June, and maybe like 3 to 4, maybe 5 days earlier, one of our friends was like, hey, I've got it. And we were like, we weren't prepared for this. What does this mean? What is this? And like, I think for those like 3 or 4 days, we knew that they had the book, but they just didn't say anything about it. And we were like,
oh my gosh, we failed.
Did they read it?
Oh,
did they
no.
like it? Like, we were just like,
Everyone hates it, don't they?
Put you in a tailspin of like waiting so long, and then like prematurely knowing someone is able to read it. It was like, oh, okay. Luckily that passed. They did eventually to be like,
they were like, I read it. It was good. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Oh.
I think I think they were waiting for other people to get it before they were talking about it, but it does your head like,
it's scary.
I'm
so
scary.
You guys know, since you make a podcast, but putting things out there is scary,
but still worth it in the long run.
Yeah, as soon as someone tells you they've like listened to your podcast or read your book and they're like, hey, that was awesome, you're like, oh, it's all worth it. With all the stress.
Yeah, people are much more like wanting you to succeed than like your head tells you.
Yeah, it's always that little voice, isn't it, where it's like, oh, but what if you actually wrote the worst thing in the world and you put out the most terrible book that's ever been created, and everyone's going to laugh at you. Then your friends are like, no, you did great, and you're like, oh, thank goodness for you guys.
And then your head goes, but you're friends with me, so you're just saying that because we're friends.
No, stop.
And then I have to be there, and then I have to be there and be like, but you made friends with them because they thought you were cool. And you're like, oh no, and then you tailspin out even further.
Yeah, writing books, being an artist, making anything is just, it's hard. It's ultimately worth it, but it's definitely a mind trip.
I'm only with you because you make cool stuff.
Don't say that.
As soon as you stop making cool stuff, I'm gone.
Get out of here.
Well, speaking of anxiety about future media content that we work on, what are we doing for the next episode of the podcast?
Why, we're reading The Ranger's Apprentice, my favorite book series of all time.
Whoa!
It's so good.
Yeah, so look forward to that next time. And we have reached the end. So we will depart now.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for having us. And thank you to anyone listening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.